Hi there and welcome to this special netplan.com.au update about a deferment of the implementation of new aged care rules that were to apply from 1st of July 2025 and now look like kicking in on the 1st of November 2025. Now this announcement only occurred on the 3rd of June, so it's only a few weeks before it was due to kick in. Quite significant, and it's well worth understanding how the system works. And that's what we need to do. To start off with, we need to know how the existing system operates and then compare them to the new rules. Now, you might think that this aged care stuff doesn't apply to you, you're years away from it. Well, it might well apply to your parents, your grandparents, aunts and uncles. And as you'll discover, it will apply to you because effectively, well, hopefully one day you'll need aged care, but it will have an impact on the amount of money that's left you because those new additional fees are probably going to erode the amount that's left to you as part of your loved one's estates. So basically the aged care system works like this: is as you move into the latter stages of life, you require more and more assistance with your day-to-day bits and pieces. Now, the government's got a pretty good system set up at the moment. It basically falls into two parts. There's in-home aged care and residential aged care. Now, a lot of people will sort of battle on through retirement. They might get a bit of help from the kids, and there's actually payments there for that, to help them sort of just keep going along, but eventually they might need some outside help. It starts off at a very simple level, which is basically doing things like cleaning, gardening, perhaps doing a bit of cooking, that sort of stuff. But then you move into a more programmed arrangement where there's specific needs, and often some of those are provided by professionals such as nursing staff, that kind of thing. But eventually, if we don't shuffle off this mortal coil, we might be facing a spot or time in aged care. An aged care facility, we used to call them homes, old people's homes, hostels, those sorts of things. Now, basically the changes that were due to kick in on 1st of July, as I've said, deferred to the 1st of November at this stage, deal with both parts of the aged care story. So in-home care is changing. We won't go into that today because it's a whole world of more pain. Not really, but I guess the system's changed. It's probably a little bit easier to negotiate than the current arrangements, but probably the most financially significant the people that are going to be affected by the changes to residential aged care. So the way the system works like this is that if you get to a stage in life where you're no longer able to look after yourself, you'll be subject to a thing called an aged cat assessment. It's done by an aged care assessment team, so they call it an ACAT assessment for short. And the ACAT team will come out and assess what sort of needs you've got, and they'll basically rank your needs against a scale based on your ability to look after yourself. At some stage, as I say, it may be decided that you can't look after yourself anymore. And look, most of the time, these things are pretty quick decisions. It could be a medical incident that means you're not able to look after yourself, a stroke, a fall, or something like that. Often these discussions occur in hospital car parks, and so it's all well and good to plan for it, but on many occasions, these things come out of nowhere. So to understand how the system works is pretty important. So the ACAT assessment will determine whether mum or dad, it's time to move into aged care. There's two parts to it. Basically, there's you buying a room or a place in the aged care facility, and there's also the daily care fee or the daily cost associated with looking after you. They're two separate things, but you know they sort of work together. You can't have one without the other, but they are two different charging arrangements. So under the existing scheme, you can buy your room, and buying a room can cost you anywhere up to $750,000. It's called a refundable accommodation deposit, RAD for short. The idea is that you hand over the money for the RAD, whatever the facility's asking, and that money stays with the RAD effectively as an interest-free loan for the period that person's in the aged care facility. Now, the RAD amounts vary. As I said, the maximum that can be charged without further government approval is $750,000. For that, you'd expect a pretty nice room, reasonable size with its own ensuite. You can go down to about $450,000. Often you'll be in a room. Sometimes they're shared. Certainly at that sort of level, you're probably looking at shared resources like bathrooms, that kind of stuff. But you are looking at 24 hours a day, 7 days a week care with trained staff that are there to assist you. And there's also a requirement that there's a registered nurse on staff and on call at all time. So it's a pretty high level of care that's provided in an aged care facility. So the $750,000 RAD, refundable accommodation deposit, is exactly that, folks. It's refundable when the person leaves the facility. Now, the law says that it's required to be returned within 14 days of the person leaving the facility or within 14 days of probate being granted, because most times the person leaves the facility because they've passed away. Now, the money that comes back to you is the full amount. If you've paid the RAD, the full amount of the RAD, then basically you get the whole 750,000, whatever the figure is, back. So basically what you've provided to the aged care facility is an interest-free loan. If you don't pay the full RAD, or you don't have the money to pay the full RAD and pay, if you like, a part of it, the amount that's outstanding of the full amount of the RAD is converted into a thing called a daily accommodation payment. Now, I won't go into the complexities of it, but basically it's the amount, the shortfall amount multiplied by a percentage. At the moment, it's about 8%, a bit higher than 8%. So if you had $100,000, effectively what you're paying is 8% of $100,000 would be, $8,000 per year divided by 365 days to give you the daily accommodation payment. Now, the first big change that's occurring once these rules kick in is the ability for the aged care facility to retain 2% of the RAD for a maximum of 5 years. So instead of getting the full amount back, if mum or dad's in there for 5 years, you're going to get 90% of the money back. So, if you're talking a $750,000 RAD, we're talking about a $700,000 or $75,000 retention by the aged care facility. And of course, if mum and dad are both in a facility, you're paying 2 RADs, then you're talking $75,000 potentially times 2 or $150,000. So we're talking some serious money. But it doesn't stop there. I've mentioned that the maximum amount that can be paid for RAD without government approval is $750,000. Well, all around Australia, there are aged care facilities which charge much, much more. And it's not uncommon for a place to be charging $1.2 million for a room in an aged care facility, particularly one that's pretty swanky, has got some views of the river or the harbour or something like that. You'll often find that the refundable accommodation deposit is much, much higher. But guess what? The 2% is of that amount. So if you've paid $1.2 million, mum or dad's in there for 5 years, 5 times 2% is 10%. You can say goodbye to $120,000 as the maximum amount that's going to be retained by the aged care facility. Now, the other part of the aged care costs are the daily care fees. Now, again, it's a means-tested type benefit. And the idea of means testing is the more money you've got, the more you're going to be forced to spend. So under this means testing system, the basic daily care fee is currently set at it's currently set at 85% of the full rate of single age pension. Now, again, most facilities will charge more than that. They'll have an extra service fee which they can charge, and depending on what sort of resources you've got behind you, you will be subject to a thing called a means-tested daily care fee. Now, I won't go into the complexity of how that's calculated, but as I say, the more you've got, the more they'll expect for you to contribute. The issue there is that caps out at $34,311. Now, that's indexed a couple of times per year in March and September. Now, at the moment, there's a lifetime cap of those means-tested contribution fees, which is currently sitting at $82,347. So once you get to $82,347, you're not expected to pay any more towards your daily care fees. However, once this new rule kicks in, that cap lifts to $130,000. So we're talking, $47,000 higher than the current aged care fee lifetime cap. So that's quite significant. In addition to that, there'll be what's called a hoteling contribution payment, which works out to be about $12.55 per day, we think. That's going to be an extra $4,500 on top of the means-tested daily care fee. So these are significant changes. And when you actually do the sums for someone that's looking at a $750,000 RAD with the retention, with the extra cost, and we're probably talking an extra $125,000 or so that will be less in the estate once their time to move on comes around. So for a couple, we're talking $250,000. And as I said before, if mum or dad or grandma and granddad is in a more swanky establishment and the RAD is higher, perhaps $1.2 million, that amount's going to be even more. Now, here's the thing. If you're in a situation where mum or dad are getting close to the need to move into aged care and you're kind of putting it off, you might want to think about doing it sooner rather than later. because one of the concessions is that if you're in the system when the rules change, you'll be grandfathered under the old rules. The old rules, you don't lose any of the amount as a retention payment, and you'll be looking at that lifetime cap of 83,000 instead of 130,000. So well worth taking into consideration, bearing in mind you've only got 4 months if the new rules kick in on the 1st of November, but something to think about if mum or dad are close to needing aged care. As I said, a lot of these decisions are made in a hotel, in a hospital car park. There's been a fall and they're not going to be able to go home. That's when the aged care issue comes up. Anyway, there's more on this on the netplan.com.au website. You can follow that. You can also follow me on Facebook. And of course, our podcasts, which are available through all good places. Just Google Nick Bruning Retirement Podcast, and it'll take you straight to the show. I hope you find that useful. We'll provide further updates once they come through. I'm Nick Bruning, and this is netplan.com.au.